Hello and welcome to Beyond Reproach.
Oh, hi.
This is Stephanie.
I'm Tux.
And this is a show about scandals and scandalousness in American politics and government.
And we be drinking.
Yeah, and we be chatting.
Ooh, we do be chatting.
Yes.
Today we are drinking some... Drinking? I don't know what that was. Here, let's cheers.
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 When I was a kid at school learning the golden rule, teacher often used to say, if you don't tell a lie, there's not a reason why you can't be like Washington someday. How could Washington be a married man and never tell a lie?
That is a damn fine cocktail. So today we're drinking Manhattans.
My favorite drink.
Oh, literally so good.
Yeah.
The reason we're drinking Manhattans today is because Manhattans were invented in 1873 at the Manhattan Club in Manhattan, New York.
Oh.
And 1873, I've had a few cocktails, don't tell.
You better not tell. Snitches get stitches.
That they do. Oh my God. So 1873 is the same year that Grover Cleveland was ruining an innocent... Okay, we have to just stop. I'm too drunk.
Never tell a lie.
Okay, 1873 was the same year that Grover Cleveland was ruining an innocent woman's life.
Was he really?
He sure was, and you'll find out more on Beyond Reproach.
Oh, that bastard.
A bastard indeed.
I never liked him.
I mean, who fucking did?
Let the record reflect. I always was very suspicious of Grover Cleveland.
As you should be. Anyone named Grover.
Thank you.
Are you a character on Sesame Street? Because it sure sounds like it. He should have been Oscar, not Grover.
What's wrong with...
Because
okay.
he fucking belongs in the garbage can.
Oh, okay.
But we'll get there. Okay. What do you know about Grover Cleveland?
I know that his first name is Grover and his last name is Cleveland.
Uh-huh. Which is a place.
And it's in Ohio.
True story.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. It's funny
I think
how
he's
that...
one of the worst presidents.
Well...
He's after Hoover?
Before Hoover. 1884.
Okay. I know...
5.
There's something about a bathtub in him?
I don't know anything about that. Basically, if you look back in history, a lot of people paint him as sort of like a lame duck. He didn't really accomplish much during his presidency, but he did have 2 terms. However, they were non-consecutive. He was our 22nd and 24th president.
Shut up.
Yeah.
I just Googled... I'm like, why do I know Grover Cleveland and bathtub? He had to have a special bathtub because apparently he was just a big man.
He was a large ass man, yes.
So he had to have like a special bathtub made to fit his body.
Wow, I
in the
didn't
White
know
House.
that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
That's all I knew about him.
I had no idea. That's funny. As our 22nd and 24th president, Grover Cleveland was the only president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. And historians love to say that he was like the coolest dude because he ran on this sort of platform when he ran for president of honesty, integrity, and anti-corruption. Democrats, when he ran in 1884 against Republican James G. Blaine, named him Grover the Good. When he was governor of New York State, he fought against Tammany Hall and did all this anti-corruption stuff. Yes.
Yeah.
Blaine, James G. Blaine, was super corrupt. The papers ran with a story that he had made a bundle on a backdoor deal with the Union Pacific Railroad, and that as a senator, he used to like to trade congressional favors for cash. To retaliate, Republican muckrakers wrote that Cleveland had once fathered a secret love child with a woman in Buffalo, New York, and was still paying child support.
Ooh.
Cleveland, whose motto was, whatever you do, tell the truth, decided that rather than try to distance himself from the story, just admitted it. He said, yes, I did sleep with the woman in the papers, and yes, I am paying child support, but I was not the only man that she was sleeping with at the time. Yeah.
Wow. Nobody asked that.
Nope, that's a fact.
Okay, so that's what we call dry snitching. When you admit to other like extraneous things to make yourself look good.
I've never heard of that, but I like it. Yeah.
It's like when kids are caught in a lie and they're just like, but my brother did this. And it's like, nobody asked about your brother, sweetie.
Yeah. So since Cleveland was the only unmarried man of the men that she was sleeping with, And
Okay.
he was such a class act,
Okay.
Grover the Good, after all.
Yes.
He decided to take responsibility for their child, even though he wasn't actually sure it was his kid.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
Okay.
He's
Oh,
just a stand-up dude.
He's too good.
What a mensch.
Yes.
He's simply doing the right thing for a woman in dire straits and protecting his friends from scandal at the same time.
Protecting his friends?
Supposedly, his friends were the other men sleeping with this woman. Yes.
Whoa. Okay.
People thought that his admission of involvement with this woman was courageous and proved what a frank and honest person he was. And so he won the election.
I could see that, yeah.
Yeah.
The first election or the second one?
The first, his 22nd term, 1884.
Okay.
So this is the story you're going to read in like history textbooks. If you look Grover Cleveland up online, his Wikipedia, this is the story they tell.
Okay.
There's plenty of articles that sort of reiterate this version of the story. And actually, when I was doing my research, this is the story I was planning on telling. Like Grover Cleveland had this sort of secret love child, but eventually manned up and took responsibility for the kid. However, once I dug a little deeper, I realized that Grover the Good was actually a real piece of fucking garbage.
Oh, no.
He was being anything but honest when he told his side of the story.
Okay.
Here's the real story. In Buffalo, New York in 1873, then Erie County Sheriff Grover Cleveland spotted 38-year-old widow and department store sales clerk Maria Halpin. He pursued her for several months until the evening of December 15th when she bumped into him on her way to meet a friend for a birthday party. He asked her to dinner. She declined. He persisted. She declined. He continued to persist.
No means no, dude.
In 1873, that was not the case. She finally reluctantly agreed to have dinner with him. Years later, Halpin gave an interview to the Chicago Tribune about the events that took place that evening. From the article, Halpin said that Cleveland had pursued her relentlessly and that she finally consented to join him for a meal at the Ocean Dining Hall and Oyster House. After dinner, Cleveland escorted her back to her boarding house.
Oh, no.
In an 1874 affidavit, Halpin strongly implied that Cleveland's entry to her room and the incident that transpired there was not consensual, and he was forceful and violent, she alleged, and later promised to ruin her if she went to the authorities.
Oh, my God.
Our president, our 22nd and 24th president,
Grover
ladies
the
and
Good.
gentlemen, yes. According to the affidavit, quote, while in my rooms, he accomplished my ruin by the use of force and violence and without my consent. She also said that when she threatened to go to the police, Cleveland, quote, told me he was determined to ruin me if it cost him $10,000 and if he was hanged by the neck for it.
Wow.
I then and there told him I never wanted to see him again and commanded him to leave my room, which he did. Maria Halpin tried to move on with her life, but about 6 weeks later, she realized she was pregnant. As an unmarried 38-year-old widow with 2 children already,
Okay.
she had no option but to reach out to him for help. Their child was born in September of 1874 in a hospital for unwed mothers in Buffalo, New York. He was named Oscar Folsom Cleveland after Cleveland's longtime best friend and law partner. Cleveland asked an obstetrician...
Wait, did he name the baby?
Yes, yeah.
Oh.
After his best friend. Cleveland asked an obstetrician friend of his to attend the birth and then to abduct the baby.
No, stop it.
And
Are you serious?
Yes, 100%. And then leave the baby with his sister-in-law.
No.
The obstetrician's sister-in-law, who just happened to be 8 months pregnant. They told her to keep the boy, call him Jack, and say that she'd had twins.
No. God, they stole her baby?
They stole her baby, gave it to another woman who was also pregnant, and said, just keep the fucking kid and say that it's yours.
Oh, that's so fucked up.
He just didn't want to deal with the kid, so he was like, don't let Maria have the kid. Like
Maria's just going to forget about giving birth to a child and just never seeing it again.
Seriously.
Okay.
Yeah. It took almost a year, but Maria eventually found her baby, took her baby back. But then, once she had her kid back, Cleveland sent another friend of his, a judge who also happened to be a trustee of the Buffalo Orphan Asylum, to persuade Maria to leave her son in the orphanage's care.
But why?
She was drinking a lot.
Because
as
of all
you
of
would.
her trauma?
She was raped and had her baby stolen from
Yeah.
her. Yeah. So she was drinking a lot, and they kind of talked her into leaving her baby with this asylum.
Oh, God.
So at first she agreed, But then a few days later, she changed her mind and tried to go get her baby. And according to the report from the orphanage, she, quote, snuck in and stole Oscar when the staff wasn't looking.
Good for her.
Cleveland tracked her down yet again and sent 2 police officers to seize the boy.
What a sociopath.
Seriously. They took the little kid, took him away from Maria, and back to the orphanage. And then they dragged Maria off to the Providence Lunatic Asylum.
I was just about to say they probably,
Yeah. Claiming that she suffered
Hysterical
from...
woman.
Yes. She suffered from monomania, which was basically a pretend 19th century mental disorder.
She's a woman who cares about her child that is no longer in her care.
It does this monomania no longer exists because it was
never real.
Yeah. But if you look back in like 19th century, well, basically it translates to bitches be crazy.
Stop it. So we'd all be locked up is what you're saying?
Symptoms of monomania include excessive drinking,
Done.
uncontrolled impulses,
Check.
and, quote, strangeness. Strangeness.
That's so good. Strangeness?
Basically, like I said,
Strangeness.
bitches be crazy.
Wow.
Yeah. So after 3 days in the asylum, she was deemed sane and released. And the doctor said her incarceration was an abuse of power by the political elite.
It was, yes.
When interviewed by the press during Cleveland's 1884 presidential campaign 10 years later, the asylum's doctor agreed that she should never have been committed in the first place. The Chicago Daily Tribune reported, quote, Dr. William King, an honored citizen of Buffalo, was then attending physician at the Providence Asylum. He said that he remembered Maria Halpin well. He says that she was brought to the asylum without warrant or form of law. When he examined her, he found she was not insane, though she had been drinking.
So she was like me.
Yeah.
Drinking, but not insane.
She enjoyed Manhattans because they were fucking delicious in 1873.
Yeah.
The managers of the asylum had no right to detain her, and she'd left in a few days. That is, as soon as she chose to after her terrible experience. So when she gets out, she lawyered up.
Good.
She started building a case to sue Cleveland for kidnapping and false arrest. And the documents that her lawyer compiled against him are actually basically the only reason we have any proof of her side of the story.
Yeah.
If she had not attempted to sue him, she would have no voice in this. Like,
it would just be his word.
Yeah.
Against this crazy woman.
Yeah.
Who was just, so strange. In her behavior.
Strange and drunk. But because she did attempt this lawsuit, there's a record.
Yeah.
There's documents in his handwriting. It did her very little good in the end. So a few days later, Maria's brother-in-law showed up from New Jersey offering to, quote, help.
Stab him in the balls.
I'm using the term help loosely here because basically he pressured her into accepting an offer from Cleveland.
No!
$500 to give up her rights to her son and move away and start a new life.
Fuck that.
And thanks to her brother-in-law's
No. She did not agree.
Yes,
she did not agree.
She agreed. She dropped the lawsuit, surrendered her son, and moved away to New Rochelle, New York in 1877.
She gave up her son for $500. She must have just been so broken at that point.
She was literally broken. She was broken.
And yeah.
Can you imagine?
I can't imagine.
You're raped. You have a child.
Your baby is taken away for a year.
And then 2 more times after that, you're committed to an insane asylum.
Oh, wow. And the things they probably did to her there. Like all the crazy things they did at the early turn of the century.
And then finally he's like...
Probably shock therapy.
Yeah. And then I'm sure the brother-in-law just didn't want to deal with her and was like, just take the $500 and go away.
It's like you have a baby that's a product of rape.
Yeah.
So maybe there you're just like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
And she did have 2 other children.
So much
because
trauma.
she was a widow. Her husband had died, and she had 2 children with her husband before he died.
Okay.
Little Oscar was adopted by the family of a doctor and basically had nothing to do with Maria Halpin or Grover Cleveland ever again. One of the articles I read said that he had been adopted by the obstetrician who had kidnapped him in the first place.
Oh, gross.
And another article...
That man is the worst.
Yeah.
You took an oath, do no harm.
Seriously.
What are you doing?
Yeah. But
harm.
It's also...
Harm is what you're doing.
Because these stories that we're telling are so old, we also run into a lot of conflicting reports. So another one of the stories that I read said that he was adopted by the same Dr. King of the Providence Asylum who had said Maria was falsely committed in the first place. I tend to believe that it was the obstetrician and not the...
Yeah, that doesn't really make sense.
But either way, Oscar grew up to be a doctor himself. What happened to little Oscar sort of seems to be a matter of debate because his name was eventually changed. But either way, it appears that he did go on to become a doctor and lived out his life in uneventful obscurity, dying childless in 1947. That basically would have been the end of the story, but 7 years after Maria was paid to disappear, her rapist became the Democratic candidate for president, and Republican newspapers forced her to live the whole thing all over again.
Yeah.
Judge magazine ran a famous cartoon on its cover with a weeping woman holding a little baby who is reaching out for Grover Cleveland and crying, "I want my paw." Cleveland is shown covering his ears and sort of stomping off. We will put this cartoon on Instagram. After this, Republicans would chant whenever they saw Grover Cleveland at his rallies or whatever, speaking engagements, "Ma, Ma, where's my paw?"
Oh.
"Ma, Ma, where's my paw?"
Yeah.
So this is, like I said, this is the story that I set out to
Yeah.
tell because I just saw that and was like, oh,
Yeah.
he fathered this like love child. But there is a lot of evidence that shows that Maria Halpin, in reality, was a total chaste Christian woman. She was a church fixture and worked to support her 2 young children. But once Cleveland was in his presidential campaign and they were trying to basically ruin her at Cleveland's expense,
Yeah.
she was painted as
A harlot.
a harlot,
Yeah.
a loose woman,
Of course.
or as one paper put it, the village belle.
Ooh, wow.
They said that she had a, quote, strange, fascinating power over men.
Wow. Wow.
And that she also exhibited every symptom of insanity. She was called every name in the book. A vile creature, a drunkard,
That's what you do.
a blackmailer, a perjurer, a would-be murderess of her own offspring.
What?
These are all quotes from newspapers. A victim of delirium tremens, and a proper inmate for a lunatic asylum.
Okay.
Because she was a woman, the papers also focused a lot of energy reporting on her looks.
Of course they did.
I have a quote from an article from the New York World. Miss Halpin is still an attractive woman, and although said to be 45 or 50, does not look more than 35. A wealth of dark hair and dark eyes, of great depth and of strange, fascinating power.
I love the strange.
Yes.
Yes.
Are in strong contrast to a pale, clear complexion while regular features and rounded chin and a classically cut and curved mouth could not fail to make a pleasant impression on those with whom she came in contact.
Wow.
Although robust, her form still preserves its symmetry, and in this in this rotundity of figure,
Ooh,
rather adds
rotundity
to
of
her
figure.
rather adds to her matured charms.
And to say nothing of how he looks.
Exactly. I mean, literally, he looks like a big fat fucking gray
Because he
walrus.
was.
Yeah.
Because he was. But also, it's this, like, level of detail in just, like, every inch of her body is so gross, but so classic when it comes to describing women.
The way, yes, exactly.
It's all about our looks. As a woman, our bodies are there for public consumption.
100%.
My body is here for a man. And
Exactly.
His
It doesn't matter.
appreciation.
Yeah.
First and foremost.
Yeah.
It's terrible. Wow.
Eventually, Maria came forward to address the rumors against her. Quote, "I would gladly avoid further publicity of this terrible misfortune if I could do so without appearing to admit the foul and false statements concerning my character." She went on to say, "The circumstances under which my ruin was accomplished is too revolting on the part of Grover Cleveland to
Yeah.
be made public."
Yeah. It's like I could talk about all this rape if you want me to talk about all
But
this
nobody
rape.
wants to hear this shit. So this is basically when Cleveland started saying that Maria had been slutting it up with a few other men when she got pregnant.
Wow.
This was never an
Gosh.
issue until he
Yeah.
was running for president. This was never said until he ran for president. One of the men that he alleged she was sleeping with was his best friend, Oscar Folsom, who they named their baby after. He named their baby after, who was sort of tangentially now deceased and could not defend himself.
Oh, perfect scapegoat.
Yeah. When asked about Cleveland's claims in an interview, Maria said, "I never spoke a word to that man in my life. There is not and never was a doubt as to the paternity of our child, and the attempt on Grover Cleveland or his friends to couple the name Oscar Folsom or anyone else with the name of that boy for that purpose is simply infamous and false."
Yeah.
In the end, though, people either bought Cleveland's side of the story or thought his personal life wasn't as unforgivable as James G. Blaine's political corruption. Cleveland won the election, and the Republican chant of "Ma, Ma, where's my paw?" was answered by Democrats, "Gone to the White House, ha, ha, ha."
Oh, that's disgusting.
Some people even added further to the chant, "Hooray for Maria, hooray for the kid. I voted for Cleveland, and I'm damn glad I did." So, as horrific as this story is, I really think that the worst part of what happened to Maria Halpin is that it's still happening to women today, more than a century later.
Yeah.
When politicians do horrible things to women, the public tends to take their word for it, and the burden of proof is on the woman. Even with solid evidence, these men still get to play the victim, and we, as a society, let them get away with it while discrediting and vilifying their accusers.
Yes.
The lies about Maria Halpin followed her for the rest of her life. And
she was ruined.
She says he achieved her ruin.
Yeah.
But really, her ruin was more achieved 10 years later when he ran for president, because the entire country saw her as basically a drunk and a slut and a crazy person.
Yeah, a liar. She had no humanity.
Her name was never mentioned in print in the New York Times, even though they talked about the story.
What?
Yeah. She had no voice.
Yeah.
She was,
Wow. In a way, I guess it's good that her name wasn't mentioned because she was just
But basically,
ripped
it
to
was
shred.
like she was the sort of nameless slut that was trying to discredit Cleveland. It's so fucked up.
It's so fucked up. And it is still happening today.
On her deathbed, she gave instructions for her funeral. Quote, "I do not want strangers to come and gaze upon my face. Let everything be very quiet. Let me rest."
Yeah.
These lies still continue to haunt her even today after her death. If you look into the story yourself, on the internet, the bulk of the stories that you're going to find about Grover Cleveland are telling his side of the story.
Yeah.
Maria Halpin is a slut, a drunk, a nut job.
Yeah.
But there's so much proof.
Yeah.
If you really look, there's so much proof that that's all bullshit.
If you go an inch beyond the surface, you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
She
but
was
there's so many articles, and some of these articles are going to be in our show notes, even the ones that say that she was the one that it was at fault. There was enough sort of interesting information that they still are included in the show notes, but like literally saying Maria was the one that was at fault and he was just being sullied, you know.
Grover the Good.
Yeah, Grover the Good. So that's exactly it. There's so much proof that that's all bullshit, and even more proof that Grover the Good was a steaming pile of fucking human garbage.
Garbage juice.
There's actually even more about him that I wanted to talk about today, but I've decided that I'm going to save it for another episode.
Part 2.
Part 2 of
Coming
Grover the
soon.
Good. Question mark.
Yeah.
Basically, the last thing I want to say, just to sort of wrap this up, is a quote from an article by Tyler Bagwell that came out during the Kavanaugh hearing.
Oh.
Maria Halpin and Christine Blasey Ford did not come forward to make names for themselves. They did not come forward on behalf of partisan politics. They did not come forward to seek criminal justice for the atrocities against them. They came forward on behalf of their country to speak of the character of the men they witnessed in the darkest moments of their lives. They came forward to keep these men from powerful positions. They came forward and we ignored them. We did it 134 years ago. We've done it now.
Sad but true.
I mean,
the Me Too movement is giving voice to a lot of women who really had no voice and no platform before, but still there is an impulse in society, especially when a woman is accusing a man who has I guess some notoriety. The impulse is the woman is lying, she's crazy, she's going to destroy a man. But it's like, what does a woman gain? It's not like
she didn't gain shit. She was
are being raped all the way to the top. Like that doesn't happen.
She probably would not have even come forward if the Republican newspapers hadn't drugged the whole story up again.
Yeah, because why would you come forward again?
It was too late at this point. Your son is gone.
It's another trauma too, because then you're made to feel even worse about what happened to you, which was shitty to begin with, and like a crime to begin with. It's
100%.
It's almost worse to come forward.
I mean, like she said in that quote, she was only coming forward to sort of show
so
that,
brave.
Yeah.
It's so brave because most women can't do it. Like I couldn't do it.
It's easy to look back and be like, well, that was 1884.
Yeah.
You know, far. These are two different times. But that's not
today.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's still happening.
You'll be destroyed in the press. Like your name will be dragged through the mud.
People know these men. They know their names. they think of them in a certain light. Grover was called Grover the Good because
Yeah.
he did fight against corruption. That's the only light that people wanted to see him in.
Mm-hmm.
And any deviation from that
Yeah.
is a lie.
Yeah.
Even
it's
though
this goes against the marketing that
yeah,
we have for him.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's all PR. It's all
Yeah.
polish.
Yeah.
It's so fucked
It's really
up.
fucked.
On that note, my cocktail's empty.
Yeah, same.
I think it's time.
Yeah,
it's time
let's-
for me to get another one.
Yeah, we'll take a little break here.
We definitely need a break after that story.
Yeah.
We'll be right back.
And we're back.
With new, fresh cocktails. Clink, clink.
Clink, clink.
There we go.
Ah, success.
To drunkenness.
To drunkenness. I will drink to that any day. So, my scandal today is the Newport Sex Scandal.
It's on my list.
Oh, so you know a little bit about it.
I know like a
Damn it.
very small, no, like minimal amount. No, don't feel like I know anything because I don't. I literally
Okay.
I know nothing.
I hope you know nothing. You know very little, but
I know
you know
very
that
little.
You know that it's a scandal.
That's basically the
Okay.
bottom line.
So no one should be shocked to hear that treating gay servicemen as second-class citizens
I'm so glad
did
that you're
not
doing this
start
story.
with Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
Yeah.
Those policies, obviously, the United States Navy sought exactly 100 years ago to find and remove gay sailors from active duty by any means necessary.
Yeah.
And I felt weird about doing this. I'm like, maybe it's not my story to tell.
No, please tell it.
I mean, language evolves and like terminology
Sure.
changes, and I invite anyone who feels like I'm using the wrong words to come after me because I just want to get better and I want to learn, and
Yeah.
I don't want to make anyone feel bad just because I don't know. I found such offensive terms that
Well, that's-
I personally was offended
Yeah.
reading,
Yeah.
let alone I would never say these things
Yeah.
on air. I'm like, okay, I'll just edit it down and use language that I think is appropriate, but if it's not my intention to hurt anyone.
I'll pipe up.
You
I
pipe up.
promise.
You'll tell me. So, despite the stir it caused at the time, the Newport sex scandal remains one of America's forgotten gay sex scandals. So great was the fear of homosexuality's influence on young American men that Franklin Delano Roosevelt, then young Assistant Secretary of the Navy, wrote an article in the June 1917 Ladies' Home Journal entitled, quote, "What the Navy Can Do for Your Boy." Many perks mentioned, discipline, character, etc., but primarily the Navy would protect all enlisted boys from any kind of quote-unquote moral depravity, which was code for protection from gay men.
Are you fucking
Moral
kidding me?
depravity.
And this was in the Ladies' Home Journal, you said?
1917, Ladies' Home Journal. FDR wrote this piece. By 1917, Newport, which is in Rhode Island, for those who don't know, Newport and other naval stations like New Orleans and Portsmouth had reported the presence of immorality, perversion, which was code for homosexuality, gender impersonation, bribery, drug use, vice, and other licentious behaviors between Navy personnel and townspeople.
Gender impersonation?
So drag.
In like 19, what did you say, 1917?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So there was a lot of drag in the military, and it wasn't seen as like a gay thing. It
Sure.
was just of the time. Like, this is what
It's
you did.
entertainment.
It's entertainment.
Yeah.
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 And it was routine, and it, like, no one batted an eye.
Sure.
Because
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
had been going on for a really long time. This is a quote. "Ladies of Newport," end quote, as the resident sailors who dressed in drag and took on female monikers called themselves, were not quite the anomaly that they seemed to some people at the time. A town best known as an elegant summertime retreat for America's 1% was the site of a naval training center that had accommodated 2,000 sailors in 1917. Complaints about the ease at which sailors came by liquor, cocaine, and the services of, quote, women of the night.
Ooh, I
Yeah.
love a woman of the night.
Yeah, they disturbed the straight-laced head of the Navy Department, Josephus Daniels. But after a series of crackdowns and brothel closings, Newport's mayor insisted that the city was, quote, as clean as any other city in the United States.
Meaning not very clean at
Exactly, exactly. Meaning, like, this shit happens
all. Like
everywhere,
we got
y'all.
cocaine and loose women
Yeah.
like anybody else.
Yeah, basically. Chief machinist mate Irvin Arnold was being treated for severe rheumatism in the Navy Training Stations Hospital in February of 1919 when he became aware of the widespread homosexual activity occurring off base, involving both sailors and local men of varying ages and professions.
While he was in the hospital?
Yes. Yeah, his suspicions were first aroused by
He was first aroused.
Yeah, he was aroused by a lot. But his suspicions were first aroused by a effeminate young sailor in the hospital. Conversations over a few days confirmed his suspicions of an eclectic world of, quote, ladies in trade, of cross-dressers and party givers, cocaine addicts and heavy drinkers for whom mobilization had been widely a social experience.
100 years ago. Stephanie recently discovered RuPaul's Drag Race.
Oh my God. I really hate reality TV.
Yeah.
It seems so petty and so fake and like everyone's trying to tear each other down and it seems like they're just creating chaos and drama out of nothing.
Yeah.
But
RuPaul's Drag Race is like
different.
the drag version of the Great British Bake Off because these queens, while there is a little drama, there certainly is drama.
Yeah.
They tend to build themselves up rather than trying to break each other down.
Yeah, it's positive. It's very like affirming and it feels so refreshing. For it to be in the world of reality TV show, to me, it's an anomaly because it's positive. Watch Drag Race. It will enrich your life.
We might actually be watching season 10 after we start recording today.
Oh my God. Okay. I need to hurry up. So his suspicions were first aroused by effeminate young sailors in the hospital. There was a robust circle of quote-unquote fairies, self-identified gay men who felt surprisingly little need to disguise their stereotypical feminine ways, who threw great parties. Is fairies an okay term to say? I know that it's been reclaimed by the gay community, but I am not of the gay community, so I feel a little weird saying
fair to use because you're using it about...
And it's a quote.
Something that they were calling themselves.
Yeah.
If you were talking about like how straight men called them fairies,
yeah.
No, that would not be okay.
Yeah.
This is a term that they used to describe themselves.
Yes.
It is also historically accurate.
I felt a lot of like anxiety about putting this together. I'm like, I don't like this word. Let me change it.
No.
And I changed a lot of words, but like this is what they called themselves.
Yeah. That's fair. And the fact
and this is not new at all. This was a thriving community before this point. Irvin Arnold hated all of this. He had not only a distaste for the private practices homosexual men engaged in, but an anxiety about it, bordering on an obsession. In his 40s, he was considerably older than most of the men he was insinuating himself with. Arnold was a 14-year veteran, and before enlistment, he had worked for 9 years as a detective in Connecticut, where, quote, running down perverts seemed to have been for him a particularly important part of his job. Whatever his motives, besides being a raging homophobe, Arnold decided to report his findings to his superiors once he had ascertained the gravity of the situation. His snitching went all the way up to the Assistant Secretary of the Navy, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, then 37. He actually was the youngest Assistant Secretary of the Navy at the time. He was voted into office at 31.
Wow.
So you would assume that he would be cool. He was not cool, you guys. He was not cool at all.
Yeah.
So FDR agreed that, quote, a most searching and rigid investigation needed to be conducted with the aim of prosecuting those individuals responsible for the spread of degeneracy.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy. The downtown Army and Navy YMCA, not surprisingly, had become one of the key centers of focus, and an Episcopal and military chaplain by the name of Reverend Samuel Neil Kent was said to be one of the most notorious of the older men routinely paying sailors for their private companionship. His parish house had allegedly seen its share of overnight guests.
Ooh.
Yeah, sexy, right? So this ex-detective from Connecticut who boasted that he could, this is crazy, he could, quote, pick out the cruising ferries on Manhattan's Riverside Drive with 90% accuracy, end quote, which just meant he had eyeballs.
Also, I love that cruising ferries was the terminology at that point in history because...
with 90% accuracy. It's
like, are you
putting this into Excel and running the... Like, I don't...
That's the same terminology that you could be using in 2019, and everyone would know exactly what you meant.
Yeah. He convinced his superiors that an undercover operation was the only way to secure evidence that would stand up in court. he quietly enlisted the staff of Navy investigators in the capacity of detectives who would circulate amongst the suspected population of so-called quote-unquote perverts at the YMCA or elsewhere, strike up friendships, take careful note of all that transpired. He wanted no one over 30, he said, on the assumption that, quote, homosexuals never bothered with men that old. His ideal volunteer was in his late teens or early 20s, handsome, none too intellectually inclined, and willing to put himself in awkward situations for the good of the service. He found more than a dozen at first and sought assurances that his men, if forced to break the law, that is, to go to the limit to complete their quote-unquote mission, would not themselves be subject to prosecution.
So the mission being like getting their dicks sucked?
I will get into the mission, but
I want
to answer your
mission.
question, yes. The specific duties these quote-unquote detective recruits were charged with fell into three categories. To one, gather information about quote-unquote cocaine joints and the sale of liquor. Two, to gather information, quote, pertaining to cocksuckers and rectum receivers, end quote.
What?
Those were the words they used.
Cocksuckers and rectum receivers.
Yeah. And quote-unquote said fairies. 3, to gather information about female prostitutes in the area. In reality, Arnold's band of investigators showed no interest in the quote-unquote fallen women of Newport.
Sure, because they were...
Only minimal concern with the illegal drug transactions happening, because it's fun for them. These secret investigations, its funds and personnel were hidden in a clandestine Navy Department document. Men attached to and serving on the staff had to perform the following, quote, being jolly and good-natured.
Fuck that.
Yeah, I know, right? Like, being jolly, okay, I can't. Ask Lewis, I can't do this. Being careful to pump these targeted men for information.
I thought it was going to be pump them full of something. And
I know, yeah. I'm like, how dare you say pump? But these are...
I'll pump them full of whatever you want me to. Oh, God. I need to shut my fucking mouth.
So, being jolly and good-natured, being careful to pump these targeted men for... I know, it's like reading it again makes it even worse. You're like, God damn it, how dare you say pump?
Literally don't say pump.
Don't say pump. This is a quote, though. For information, making them believe that he is what the Navy referred to at the time as a, quote, boy humper. Making dates with them and so forth. So, in short, this was entrapment in the most classic sense of the word. Because they're setting up men to be in these situations that they're pushing, and then they're going after them legally. So these men were encouraged to have sex with their peers, other Navy men, in order to identify the, quote, ringleaders of this gang, arranging from time to time meetings so as to catch them in the act, end quote. Again, entrapment.
Sure.
This is illegal.
Yeah, I'm trying to make light of it.
Yeah.
It sounds that's fun.
Yeah, I wish it was fun, but it's legally binding and it's also illegal what they're doing. In their pursuit of gay targets, these investigators, air quotes around investigators, were tireless. And by all accounts, the amount of oral sex they enjoyed in the line of duty was, to quote a New York Times article, staggering. The intimate details of their legendary performances were to become, by the end of the summer, a profound humiliation to the Department of the Navy and its leadership. The quote-unquote operatives, as they were called, were being sent by the Navy's own Comstock to record the nitty-gritty, complete to climax, and they did just that. Many of the operatives, when recounting their pre- and post-coital conversations, seemed especially gratified at being told that they had large penises. So they're having a lot of fun.
Yeah. The men that would agree to this
are
clearly sort of like on the...
on the line. The Kinsey scale.
Kinsey scale. Thank you.
And there's nothing wrong with being on the Kinsey scale, but it's like they're going after people, and it's like you feel very comfortable. And there's nothing wrong with feeling comfortable, but it's like you're going after people who are like you.
And that's the problem, is that they are targeting people who feel the same way that they do.
Exactly.
But they have protection because of it.
Yes. I'm going to say it's real fucked up and not right.
You're also getting away with it and getting paid for it while outing other people and putting them in whatever, jail or whatever. Yeah.
So arrests began on April 4th, and by April 22nd, 15 sailors had been arrested. Each was brought before a military tribunal and heard men whom they recognized as former sexual partners who provided graphic testimony about their encounters because they didn't know that they were being recorded, essentially. They just thought that they were having a sexual encounter, a romantic encounter with some man. They didn't realize that they were set up, basically. So, nervous and confused, the gay servicemen professed to be willing to tell whatever they knew about gay life in Newport because they're caught on the spot.
Sure, yeah.
So on May 1st, 1919, after the 3-week military trial ended, it ended with the court-martialing of 17 sailors charged with sodomy and, quote, scandalous conduct. Most were sent to a naval prison in Portsmouth, a naval shipyard in Maine, and 2 more were dishonorably discharged. The matter might have ended there had Arnold had not wished to press on with an investigation even before the first court-martial had begun, expanding their field of operations beyond downtown Newport and encompassing the rest of civilian homosexuals as well. Roosevelt gave his permission and allotted needed funds for this extra investigation that really didn't need to happen. But sailors, some still in their teens, were being allowed, or even encouraged, really, to participate in what at the time were illegal sex acts. The repercussions of the investigation might not have been so dramatic had Arnold not gone after an Episcopal minister with solid reputation amongst the church hierarchy of Newport. When the Reverend Samuel Neil Kent was arrested in midsummer, the troublesome publicity began. The church fathers of Rhode Island seemed quite sure that the 46-year-old chaplain, who was a graduate of the renowned Latin School Boston and a man who had devoted his life to good works, was not guilty of the 11 counts of, quote, lewd and scandalous behavior in which he was charged. Known to his men as Pop, air quotes, Kent, he was clearly a decent fellow and an effective professional who took his spiritual duties really seriously. He was a minister who had risked his life the year prior tending to sick people during an influenza epidemic. But he also liked to masturbate to sailors. So that a minister who had risked his life the year prior tending to sick during the influenza epidemic also liked to masturbate to sailors was incomprehensible to his religious peers. Or so they said. Who really knows? But this is what they were saying in the press. On the other hand, the government and prosecuting attorney had no problem believing that Kent was guilty, but were naively unprepared, like the stupid bigots they were, for the fact that the judge or the jury would be outraged by their method, the salacious story behind the indictment. So Kent's trial brought out all that Arnold had labored to keep secret, namely that men as young as 17 had been sent out into the night like streetwalkers, taught to deceive their motives, paid to spend their time in rooms where liquor and drugs were available, men in their 20s who certainly could have declined the assignment had allowed their bodies to be used in, quote, unspeakable ways. When one befuddled operative left the stand, having acknowledged that he understood his instructions were to let the minister, quote, play with my penis and allow it until an emission, unquote.
You can't have it both ways.
Yeah, no, you can't.
You can't say that you get to choose these men, these young men, have a night, and then also get to hold them responsible while not being responsible yourself.
It made no sense when it came out, and people were just like, wait, actually,
it's
no.
Fucked.
No. This is not how things should work. So the reaction in town set against the Navy and its tactics because they heard this testimony and they're like, what the fuck?
You guys set them up, essentially.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is entrapment. So Kent was found innocent.
Good.
Yeah, but they were stung by the verdict, and the government wasn't ready to let the matter rest. And under a recent war statute that prohibited conduct, quote, leading to moral contamination, end quote, within a 10-mile zone of any military installation, Plans were made to try Kent a second time in federal court this time. So he was hunted down. He left Rhode Island. He was hunted down like a fugitive while he was recuperating at the Battle Creek Sanatorium in Michigan. And that name sounded really familiar to me, and I'm like, let me just Google it. Because it sounded like where Warren Harding went.
It's so funny.
And it is where Warren Harding went.
Yeah.
So that's where this preacher went. They found him and they brought him back.
Oh my God.
They brought him back to Rhode Island. As embarrassing as the ordeal was for Kent, the second trial in 1920 was no less a rejection of the Navy's approach and values than the first. The debauching of these boys by the U.S. government into whose care their parents had entrusted them became a bigger concern than the actual, gay people in Newport. 14 clergymen, business leaders, and prominent socialite friends of Kent testified on his behalf, and Kent, again, was found innocent. At this point, the Providence Journal went on the attack to inflame public opinion and widen the scandal to a national level. Wow. The Providence Journal published a letter which named the Secretary of the Navy, Josephus, Daniels, and Roosevelt explicitly. Fearing a catastrophic effect on naval enlistment, they were forced to call for a high-level naval investigation into the matter, and this in turn led to an even more aggressive, independent-minded Senate investigation. Wow. So it went all the way to the top. While investigation dragged, Roosevelt resigned from his position as Assistant Secretary of the Navy in July of 1920 when he accepted the Democratic Party's nomination for vice president. He and presidential candidate James M. Cox were on the losing end of Warren G. Harding's landslide victory that year. On July 1921, a subcommittee of the Senate Committee on Naval Affairs denounced both Daniels and Roosevelt for the methods used in the Newport investigations. The court-martial's assessment was that Roosevelt's behavior was, quote, unfortunate and ill-advised, conduct of a character at which seasoned veterans of the service would have shuddered was practically forced upon boys, end quote.
Can you remind me again, is this TR or FDR?
FDR, I know.
Wow.
I know.
Yeah.
I know you love him.
Oh, nobody's perfect. Especially
Everyone
in government,
is
nobody's
person.
Perfect. Yeah.
Perfection does not exist.
It does not exist.
Tuck just walks out of the room and shuts the door.
With my pearls, don't forget.
Obviously. You clutch your pearls and then you walk out. And
only the finest of aquatic pearls.
So the committee wrote that for Daniels and Roosevelt to allow personnel to be placed in a position in which such acts were liable to incur was, quote, a deplorable, disgraceful, and most unnatural proceeding. Roosevelt rejected the report, contesting that many details and interpretations. And then he went on the attack. He said that, quote, this business of using the Navy as a football of politics has got to stop. He had nothing to say about the court-martial's assessment because clearly he was the real victim.
Yeah.
The Newport Sex Scandal, it faded rather quickly from national news. It was not the kind of scandal that the public enjoyed hearing about at the time. I guess by the time FDR ran for governorship of New York in 1928, and then for presidency 4 years later, the sad fate of the Newport men and their sexually active entrappers, and Roosevelt's part in the affair were ancient history.
Sure.
The end.
I mean, this is a fascinating story, and I think it's because it is 100 years old and it's so topical today. I think that, both of these stories that we told today are really topical today.
Could be pulled from the headlines.
It goes to show you where we are as a society 100 years later.
Yeah.
That we're still talking about this shit.
But I think the fact that we just don't really talk about history in a real way is why we're constantly repeating history.
Well, and clearly people don't know these stories. People don't know about Maria Halpin. People don't know about the Newport Sex Scandals.
Yeah.
And it's hard to relate stories that are 100 years old to young people or to people who are not active historians or...
In theory, it's hard, but we're talking about the same thing. So it should be very relatable.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, thank you for tuning in.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
We're out
with our cocktails.
Yeah, oh, God.
That's an empty glass. That is the sound of an empty glass that I probably am going to go fill one more time.
Fill. I'm really impressed that we got through. We drank a lot.
We have consumed a great deal of whiskey.
As one does, we're doing this for the people.
It's for you guys.
Yes.
We didn't do this for ourselves.
We're becoming alcoholics for you.
For you. I would much rather be a teetotaler. Stephanie almost
I would
spits
not.
her cocktail.
I literally almost spat like
Yes.
delicious, expensive whiskey and vermouth onto the ground.
True story.
Yeah, but I didn't because I'm a professional.
Not true story is the fact that I said that I would be a teetotaler because I love me some whiskey and vermouth. Thank you guys so much. This has been, I would say, a particularly topical episode of Beyond Reproach.
Yeah.
Please rate, review, and subscribe. Written reviews are especially important. We need people who do not listen to this wonderful, wonderful show
Shame on you.
to see how wonderful it is.
Yeah.
And written reviews express that.
And the more written reviews we have, the higher we rise in rankings and more people can see us. It's a win-win-win.
Exactly.
I'm not going to describe the other two wins, but you know what they are.
So please tell a friend, especially a friend who's interested in American history.
Yeah.
Follow us on social media.
Do it. I'm so lonely, you guys.
We
I'm
both
just
are.
like hanging out, sending all these weird memes, but like no one talks to me.
Stephanie loves Twitter. I love Instagram.
Do it.
Goodbye.
Bye, you guys.